Hello, Lori. Hi, Lori.
Hi.
How are you? This is Lori St. John, everyone. By the way, Lori, I just need to warn our readers, listeners, this is a serious show. It's a silly show that we do most of the time, but I met Lori at New York Book Expo. She had just come out with a wonderful book, and she told me her history. She is one of those visionary pioneers that helps get innocent people out of bad situations in the penal system. So, Lori, thanks for contacting me beforehand. I'm glad we got to meet, and we talked a little bit at the Book Expo. And just tell our listeners a little bit about what you're doing and your history, your background. I'll throw some questions in if needed, but I'm sure you have a lot to say, and I don't want to interrupt the stream of thought as you describe your history. It's really great. And, by the way, this is important to me because I always love people who maybe aren't famous or aren't big players, and maybe they're not wealthy, but they have a passion for doing something good in the world and making a difference. And you're one of those people, so I really appreciate what you do.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me, Louis. And yes, let me tell you about my book. In my book, The Corruption of Innocence, and for the very first time, I tell the behind-the-scenes story about the death penalty case of Joseph O'Dell, which brought DNA testing to the forefront, and it also inspired changes in the law regarding DNA testing in our country.
So I just want to jump in. This is important. So it is because of that particular case that you were involved with that you're now using DNA testing in a lot of situations that they wouldn't have beforehand, correct?
Absolutely. O'Dell was one of the first inmates in 1986 to ask for DNA testing when it wasn't even used to convict the guilty. He had the foresight to ask for it to prove his innocence. So we were at the forefront of this long, long ago, before we started seeing all these exonerations. There's 308 of them in our country now. There were not that many of them at that time. As a matter of fact, Kurt Bloodsworth was one of the first ones in 1989 to be exonerated with DNA testing. So Joe O'Dell's case was quite extraordinary, and that this really brought DNA testing to the forefront and really educated people about the importance of it.
Well, were you able to get him out because of the DNA testing?
Well, you're going to have to read the book, Louis, on that one. Actually, what we were able to do was galvanize international intervention from the Italian and European parliaments and Pope John Paul and Mother Teresa and Sister Helen Prejean, the author of Dead Men Walking, because they were all outraged that we had, a Commonwealth of Virginia, that antiquated 21-day rule that did not allow new evidence in, which would have meant DNA testing, and they would not give us the DNA test that we needed in order to fully exonerate him.
So he was never exonerated?
No, he was not exonerated. We had asked for DNA testing. The only DNA testing that they had was incomplete. The only test that did come back with a result excluded him as a suspect. The blood was not the victim's blood, and we wanted to do more testing to be definitive in our testing so that we could exonerate him, but we never did get that chance.
Well, I'm going to tell everybody to buy your book, but you need to tell me, is he in prison now, or you get out? What happened?
Well, I kept telling your listeners that, Louis. I think the important thing for this is the book outlines and details the backstory of what happens behind closed doors. Things, Louis, that people most definitely don't see in the general public. Political maneuvering, suppressed evidence, intimidation of witnesses. Like I said now, and we hear about people being released day by day, but we don't know what happens that causes this to continue over and over and over again. And my book, The Corruption of Innocence, shines a spotlight, an actual international spotlight, where we literally had the world standing witness to find out for one person, for one cause, was the United States going to do the right thing? In our opinion, no, it's not. But my book knows all of that, so that it will be a pivotal point for people to understand how the system works, so we can help prevent future egregious miscarriages of justice.
Tell me more. Are there a lot of cases that you're working on right now? Are you still involved in this in particular, aside from his case?
Well, yeah, as a matter of fact, there is something that I am doing in this case. I'm not privy to talk about it at this time because it's a continued investigation with regard to any wrongdoing. But I would point to the cases of Detective Scarcella in Brooklyn, the 50 cases that are now being looked at, and Michael Morton's case, where we had a court of inquiry for the very first time in our country, a landmark case where we had a prosecutor who is now a judge being criminally held responsible for the wrongful imprisonment of Michael Morton for almost 25 years. Wow. That might be a landmark case, Louis, but what I'm looking to do and what my mission is to use the Odell case as a spotlight for all of these other cases to prevent these same types of miscarriages of justice. Because until and unless we change underlying problems in the system, which I outline, throughout the book, but in three simple words, I'll give it to you. I use the words transparency or truth and integrity, transparency and integrity are the first main ones. Transparency and truth, because if we don't have that, we're never going to get the truth in the system. It's going to be a chess game where the strongest player would win. And I think that's not exactly what we want in the system. Authenticity and integrity. If we don't have integrity with our public officials, then what do we have? In the Corruption of Innocence, I outline, what happens when you don't have integrity, suborning perjury, intimidation of witnesses, a slew of things that happen. And I'm not talking just about prosecution. I'm talking about police officers. I'm talking about defense attorneys. It really pretty much goes across the board. As a criminal defense attorney now and someone who was the founder and director of the Innocence Project, I can tell you that I have seen across the board that the lack of integrity is one of the main things that affects the outcome of a case.
Now, you're an attorney yourself?
I am an attorney.
I didn't know that. When we met, I wasn't even aware of that. So that's new information for me.
Yeah, I'm the former founder and the director of the Innocence Project at the Rutgers School of Law, which is where I went to school. So while I was a student, I founded and directed the Innocence Project, and, we spearheaded that. We had a couple of cases there. Use that. And in that particular instance, I was, trying to bring these things to the forefront. So, and going back to those three principles, the transparency and truth and integrity and accountability. The Michael Morton case is about accountability. We need to hold people accountable for misconduct. And until and unless we do, we are likely to see these exonerations to continue over and over and over again unless we change the underlying reasons behind them.
Tell me a little bit about what your day is about. So you're working on more than one case, I assume, that you're sort of out there looking at a number of different cases if you can help people who appear to be innocent.
No, my mission right now is not specifically different one particular case. My mission is much more global than that, and that I'm going to use this case to educate people in speaking engagements. Like I have a training session at the Public Defender's Office November 25th, 26th, and speaking engagements to police officers, to the law schools, to investigators, to the general public, to educate people about what happens behind closed doors so people understand it in an effort to prevent any future miscarriages of justice.
So, I just want to ask you, so let's say I was a good guy, I'm trying to be a prosecutor. A thought comes to my mind, I just want to put this out to you. We didn't talk about this before, but I think it's relevant in my listeners' mind. So I had a friend who was a judge, and I don't know if this is relevant, but I think it may be, and I'd love your feedback on it anyway. So I was in his court, and he invited me to sit in on his cases. He was an appellate court judge. And there's a guy came in a suit, very well spoken, that got busted for crack dealing, and he had no record at all. And I'm a progressive liberal. That was my background politically. And so he does this case, and he holds the guy over the weekend. And I said to him, it's terrible. The evidence is weak. I was watching the case. The evidence is weak. He's never been arrested for anything before. He's well-spoken, and he said there's something about the guy that just doesn't feel right. So he held him over the weekend, and in my mind, it was an innocent guy who got caught up in the system that got stuck there for the whole weekend in this criminal, in prison. And it turned out that this is a guy actually who, I don't know if he was guilty on this case or not, but he had a rap sheet a mile long. And it turned out he had paid somebody to switch with him and paid someone else to switch with him who was corrupt on the other side. It wasn't corrupt in getting somebody prosecuted. It was actually corrupt in getting someone not prosecuted. So how do they separate between people who actually are guilty versus people who are innocent? I mean, how does that process work?
Well, I mean, as a criminal defense attorney, I could say the most you can do and what you aim to do when you're at trial is to look to defend the constitutional rights of your client. I actually never asked my clients, were you guilty, were you not? Because what we're looking at is the process itself. And I looked at in the Joseph Odell case and with a 4-year investigation of reading the entire transcript record of 31 volumes, 1,000 pages and 155,000 pages altogether. I looked at the fairness, or should I say in this particular instance, the unfairness and injustice in the system. What you want to do is be sure that everything is above board. And I'm going to take you back again to transparency, or the lack of intimidation of witnesses, or no suppressed evidence. If we share the evidence, if we keep everything up front, and if the prosecution or the police officers look at all the suspects and don't rush to judgment if it's a high-profile case, or they don't like the defendant because the defendant has a prior criminal record, or in your instance, where someone might be guilty and they're getting off because there's another reason why. If we look to do the right thing, instead of political maneuvering, instead of, what I show in my book, The Corruption of Innocence, is why sometimes political positioning is important. People don't necessarily understand. In our particular case, we had a prosecutor that was looking to be a judge, and he had to withdraw from judgeship nomination because the heat got turned on. And when the heat became turned on, what happened? He withdrew, and he had his buddies fight his battles with me. So, some of these things can be very politically motivated, and then at some point, they start to become personally defended by prosecutors, and you have seen across the country how most of them, 99% of them, will not say, I'm sorry, I took your life. You talk about one day, try talking about 25 years for something you did not do.
So you think the system's really that broken that 90%, 95% of the people who make those mistakes never apologize and never make amends?
What happens, Louis, is that they then come up with other theories, even though, and this is what I have a problem with, is the lack of integrity. If you make a mistake, not only in the justice system, in life, you admit you make the mistake and you learn from your mistakes and you move on. But what happens in these wrongful convictions is they make a mistake and then they turn around and they change their theory. Maybe it wasn't one suspect, maybe it was two. Well, maybe the guy didn't stay in the apartment too long, and maybe, he left quicker, or, they come up with an alternative theory, but that is not the theory and is not the position that they took at trial. So, like in the Joseph Odell case, and the thing that got me so riled up, and what people don't know, and they will know after this book is released.
Tell the name of the book again, by the way, please. Tell the name of the book.
Right now, it's looking at late July.
No, I want them to know the name of the book. Laurie St. John.
The Corruption of Innocence, A Journey for Justice.
The Corruption of Innocence, A Journey of Justice. Who's the publisher?
It's a self-published book. It's a Creative Production Services, and the distributor is taking it through Ingram and Barnes & Noble.
Very nice.
It'll be available on Amazon.com.
Great.
It's going to be everywhere.
When is it coming out? Is it out now? Is it out now? It's coming out?
Next week. It will be available as a pre-order on Amazon.
That's great.
It will be available as well on my website. And if you go to my website, www.lauriestjohn.com, I have updates about it all the time. There's radio, interviews, media, print media from all over the world. A lot of the backstory things that people don't see, documents, photographs. I mean, I clue you into a whole bunch of things that I've never shared before.
So let's say I'm a person that has a relative in prison, and I'm convinced that my relative is innocent, and they're listening to this, this interview, and they'll buy your book, and but they say, I wish I could reach this woman. Is there an email they can contact you at, or a website they can contact you at? I know you gave me a website, but some way that somebody who felt that maybe you could connect them up to people who can help their situation. Is there some way they can reach you?
Yes, absolutely. On my website, there's a contact page, and on that contact page, it has a variety of information, for speaking engagements, for consultations, for interviews, what have you. So my contact information is most definitely on the website, and I'll repeat again, it's www.lauriestjohn.com. I also have a Facebook page, Facebook, obviously, Laurie St. John Author, where if you follow me on that, I offer tips and information and Saturday, morning tips for my fans and viewers that want to learn a little bit about my experience. Because my experience, Louis, was not just solely about this one innocent person that was facing death for something I felt he didn't do. My experience also, and I want to relate to the listeners, is all about what you can do as one person. How one person can make a difference in the world. How I might have stood alone in the beginning, frustrated, and you can only imagine no one's listening to you. You're an unknown person. You're up against a powerful government. But yet at the end, I had the Pope. I had Mother Teresa. I had the entire Italian Parliament. I had the entire European Parliament and millions of people staying up all night long to see if there would be justice for Joseph Odell. So one person can make a difference. And, the tools and the things the principles that I share throughout my book, I hope it will be very inspiring for people that read the book, The Corruption of Innocence, in order to utilize those tools and be successful in their own lives.
Great. Well, are you working on another book at this point, or on what other projects that you can speak about are you working on in terms of this?
Great question. Sorry to interrupt you.
That's okay.
Yeah, I'm excited about the book, actually. I do have another book that will be coming out in the future, but after I work with this, because there's so much that's going on with this book. It's being so well received, and I'm just so delighted about that. But the next book actually will be a little bit more about the tools and the strategies that used in that book to be successful in order to galvanize international support and what I did. I am a lawyer, but I did not tell you that I'm also a CPA. And, I had a CPA practice for like 20 years, and, I've been a lawyer for about 15 years, and so combined 35 years of that practice.
Boy, you like school, huh?
No, I'm an entrepreneur. I did my own real estate development when I knew nothing about development. I tapped into the publishing world, and I quickly saw that, I can do the same thing and produce the same quality, as everyone else. And that's exactly what I did.
Good for you.
What I'm going to do and what I will share with everyone is how to achieve, maximum results doing things, and how to cut through the chase. I call it cut through the and achieve high results. And so that's, basically what I'll be teaching people in the future.
Well, let me ask you a question. Are you familiar with the National Speakers Association?
Yes.
Okay, I used to be president in New York, so if you didn't know that, I would sort of turn you on to them, but you know already, so there you go.
Yeah, I'm familiar with them, and yes, that's exactly what I'll be doing, is, speaking around the country and educating and inspiring people, because my mission is twofold. One is educational, so I can educate the law students that are not out there yet, the general public, police officers, investigators. I happen to be a consultant to one of the cities here in South Florida. I consult a city on how to run the city, effective and efficient operations. So I had an ongoing conversation with a police officer who has seen these wrongful convictions and seen what happens behind closed doors. And it's kind of interesting, what happens. A lot of times it's a lack of communication. It's not following through. So I'm using the tools that I have to educate and then inspire. I really do hope that I can inspire people to really achieve amazing, wonderful things, because we all have that inside of us.
Sure. I was going to add, I was looking today, I'm looking at, we want people to have a fair trial, and I'm looking at the news feed as I do the show, and there was a piece about this woman who supposedly murdered, she was a nanny and she murdered the kids, but you can see that, you want people to get a fair jury trial if you can. And this is before someone's even in the system, particularly. It's just the press. And they show a picture of the woman. She's got dreadlocks. She's scowling at the camera. Then they show the picture of the kids that they say she killed. And they're all smiling, and it's a lovely family. And I could see if I was an honest citizen that wanted to be in a jury and wanted to serve justice, I would already be manipulated by just the press to think that this person might be guilty, who might be innocent. She says she's innocent. And I got to tell you, I was on a jury once, and this person, I acquitted him. We acquitted the guy, and we found out later that he was really guilty. And then another time I remember that there was a thing called wilding. It was a bunch of young kids in Manhattan that were accused of gang raping this woman and beating her to an inch of her life, and they put them in prison. And it turned out that they were innocent. After the 10 years, they let them out of prison. They were innocent. Some other guy copped to the charge. So just for my listeners, it's very easy to think that someone's guilty. It's very easy to think that someone's innocent, but due diligence is important. And a lot of times, prosecutors and defense prosecutors and the system are not diligent about protecting the rights of people who've been accused of a crime or convicted of a crime.
Louis, you couldn't have said it any better, because that's actually what my passion is people actually looking at the people in the system that can make the difference, the lawyers, the investigators, what have you. When you're in your fact-finding mission is to tell you as an attorney, and I'll tell you most attorneys will probably not share something like this with you, but I will tell you as an attorney, and reviewing this record and seeing some of my colleagues out there, not all attorneys are zealously defending their clients. It's the fact.
Yeah, we know that. We hear about that.
Yeah, we know that. All right, there's all these attorney jokes, and I laugh at them myself, because some of them actually are factually correct. I
have never scraped an attorney off the bottom of my shoe, ever. Never. Listen, by the way, we have about a minute to go, so I hate to cut you off, but if you can give me some closing thoughts, mention the name of your book again, your name, and of course the website. I hate to do this; it's just the time of the station.
Absolutely. Well, I hope you read my book, The Corruption of Innocence, A Journey for Justice. Please find me on Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com and on my website, www.lauriestjohn.com. And please follow me on Facebook, where I give you tips on Laurie St. John author, and on Twitter. And, I promise you a ride when you read the book to educate and inspire you. And I love you all. Thank you so much for listening to me, and I hope to see you out there in my speaking engagements.
Thanks, Laurie. It's great meeting with you. And by the way, NSA is having a convention in Philadelphia this summer. Just so you know, National Speakers Association. Great organization.
Beautiful. Well, thanks, Louis. I appreciate it, and thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thanks for being on the show. Great interview. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Wonderful. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.